And so, with this war on drugs, very similar to prohibition on alcohol, the federal government decided that just because they think it's bad for you, that it ought to be illegal. Now, if you recall what happened during prohibition, people that wanted to drink would still get their alcohol. But because it's illegal, you created an underground economy. This gave birth to not only street gangs here in the U.S. that were selling drugs on the corner. This is what happened with the war on drugs. Same thing that happened during Prohibition. Prohibition only lasted 12 and a half years. We've been at this for over 50 years. But more specifically to the title of the room, should U.S. troops fight drug cartels? Well, the drug cartels themselves are a product of the war on drugs, because if we were to legalize drugs, we could tax it and we could manufacture it here. We can manufacture it and label it fentanyl free, making it safer for all consumers of illicit drugs. But more importantly, we would minimize the danger of these drug cartels, and we would take all their power away. Because if we were to make it legal, we can manufacture it, we can completely decimate that industry, and then what we can do is we can declare a legitimate war on drugs to say that if you operate outside of what we've made legal, then we are going to you're going to have serious repercussions, and that would be at a country level. I think what we would do is we can work with closing off the border to anybody coming into the country, as long as Mexico is going to allow people to move illicit drugs. By the way, I think the consumers would probably approve of going to a dispensary to be able to purchase their drugs, knowing that they're safer and that they're tested. This is my opinion. But I want to hear from others. We've got a mixed panel here. What we're going to do here, a little bit different, is when you speak, I'm not going to move you down to the audience, because if you speak, somebody might have a response for you. And then to that response, you may want to respond back to them. The right of reply, I think, is very important. I'm going to pass it over to Anson and Moose. We'll start with Anson. We'll get to Moose. But Anson, go ahead and give us your thought.
Well, the reason I'm eagerly anticipating what's going to happen in this room is my concerns that we clearly state the problem, and that is the topic. What is the problem? And then we can, if we agree on the problem but disagree on solutions, that is a legitimate debate, properly and calmly and rationally held. If we don't agree on the problem, then arguing about the solution isn't going to get us anywhere. So, Mojo, I think, stated the problem. Are the importation of illegal drugs in the United States a problem? And I think all of us would agree that that is a problem. Okay. How best should we combat that illegal introduction of drugs into America? That's a broad topic. This one has picked specifically, should the troops, U.S. troops, fight the drug cartels to mitigate the importation of drugs. So, to stay on topic, I would first suggest, I will offer my opinion very briefly. No. United States military troops should never be involved in law enforcement activities. God forbid, inside the United States, but even exterior to the United States. American troops are not trained as law enforcement agencies, and the use of them to enforce the laws is wrong-headed and should never even be considered. So I oppose the idea of U.S. troops fighting the cartels, but I would put a caveat to that. If they come into the country, cross the borders, and law enforce the sanctity of our borders might well be considered. I'll leave it at that.
Well said. Well said. Moose, go ahead. Let's get your thoughts on the table.
I agree. I'll keep it brief. I know we have other speakers here. So I agree with Hanson. I don't think military. I don't think that was ever the purpose of military to enforce laws. They're what essentially make us literally a military state. And where we draw the line is even a bigger problem, right? If we're gonna, let's war on drugs, right? Like you stated earlier, Mojo with Nixon. Where would we stop? There has to be a distinction between what military represents and what DEA, drug enforcement agency, FBI, those agencies are better equipped, and it's counterintuitive to have military. Like the rabbit hole that we could go down if we start with drugs, to continue down that path to enforce other laws in this country would, I think, just be extremely problematic, to say the least. As radical as it is, what if we tossed out the idea? I mean, we forget that in history terms, that long ago, it's not the 1800s. It was, prohibition was real. The fact that you couldn't go out and buy beer, and of course, what happened was organized crime. Al Capone took full advantage of that. So, similar to today, if we legalize a lot of these drugs, it's gonna essentially significantly reduce the demand for the need for the cartel and their business. So, Mr. Interested what others have to say.
Hey, moderators, this is Congressman candidate John Kitover. I'd like to be put in the queue to answer this room title question.
Go right ahead, future Congressman Kitover. We're honored to have you here in our presence. Go ahead.
Thanks for organizing this room and having a rational discussion with regard to this topic. I asked Grok, hey Grok, why should the U.S. end the war on drugs? How much has been spent on the war on drugs since Nixon? And I tagged Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense. Grok replied, the U.S. should end the war on drugs immediately because it has failed to reduce drug use or availability despite massive costs, fueled mass incarceration, disproportionately affecting minorities, exacerbated violence via black markets, and ignored effective public health approaches like treatment and harm reduction. Diverse analyses, this is all cited by the Brookings Institute and the ACLU, show legalization and regulation saves lives and money. Since Nixon in 1971, over $1.2 trillion has been spent per estimates from the Statistica and the White House Budget Office. That's the first thing I wanted to say in regards to title. This is what I wrote. This is what I would consider to be the next step. 1.2 trillion since 1971. This is the next step. Democracy dotters, ferocious fascism, cackling communists, equally frauds cavort crazily all over the globe. They are hemming us in. They are abortive births of the American liberty and dream. But liberty stirs once more in the womb of time. Evolution makes its changes by anti-socialistic ways. The abnormal man here on Clown House, who foresees the trend of the times and adapts circumstance intelligently, is laughed at, persecuted, censored, put in the goo, often destroyed by the herd. But he and his heirs, when the crisis comes, are survivors. Above us today hangs a danger never yet paralleled in history. We suppress the individual in more and more ways. We think in terms of the herd. War no longer kills soldiers, it kills all indiscriminately. Every new measure of the most democratic and autocratic governments is communistic in essence. It is always restriction. We are all treated as imbecile children. DORA, the Shops Acts, the motoring laws, Sunday suffocation, and clubhouse censorship. They won't trust us to cross the roads at will.
John, you're getting off topic.
Well, I'm just about finished. When I'm finished, I will say I am complete. Fascism is like communism and dishonest into the bargain. The
We're
dictate.
not discussing fascism and communism. We're discussing military troops to fight the drug cartels. Thank you very much.
Well, the
Yeah,
moderators
do
have
you want to
spoken.
take 30 seconds to give us your opinion on whether U.S. troops should fight drug cartels?
Sure, absolutely. The United States military should not use their most precious asset, our troops, to attack international narco terrorist organizations. Instead, we should no longer allow illegalization and incarceration of Americans who choose to use intoxicants. In fact, we should let out all prisoners in all U.S. prisons who are there for using drugs. And we should also stop all funding to the DEA as well as cut the NDAA by $400 billion per year and bring down our national defense budget to $600 billion a year. I am complete.
Wow, wow, Mojo, he's pretty informed there. He's quick on the numbers.
Yeah. Would anyone like to take the position that we should have U.S. troops fight drug cartels? It seems like that's a position that Donald Trump is leaning towards. I'm just curious if anybody supports that option. Anybody?
I think that option's more effective than our overburdened law enforcement agencies because clearly they're not doing a good job. But I'll be honest with you, I feel like that's
How long was that? Like 60 seconds?
Band-aid on a bleeding artery.
Can't even read a
Because
little
while
thing.
it may
Nobody
disrupt
has any
things
patience.
temporarily, I mean, the illicit drug cartels, that's like $150 billion business every year for them. So that's not really going to do anything to fix the problem. And, you know, I have some reservations about legalization simply because, I worry particularly about the youth in our country and normalizing the legalization of drug use. I don't think that's necessarily a great idea. Our health care system is already burdened by like $740 billion a year on treating things like overdoses and handling addiction issues. So I worry that that's just going to expound on that cost as well. And I don't really know that decriminalizing it, which is kind of like that midway road, I don't know that that's even really a solution either, because that really isn't going to do nothing for controlling the supply-demand issue, which is going to still give the cartels power. So I don't know. This is not an easy fix.
I would love to hear somebody that disagrees with serendipity there. She was the first one to really offer support of the idea that, or at least consideration for U.S. troops fighting drug cartels as an option that might be more beneficial than what we're currently doing. Does anybody want to respond to that, Anson or Moose?
I want to inject a different question based on what serendipity said. If everybody in here agrees we should use the troops to fight the cartels, but she said that law enforcement is not doing a very good job in fighting. First of all, again, we got to be careful. Are we trying to stop the importation of drugs across our borders? Yes or no? Of course we are. Law enforcement is trying. But the other problem is once the drugs are here, how do we enforce the current laws? Is the inability of law enforcement to do either of those a result of inept law enforcement, or is it a result of the laws that we expect them to enforce?
It's an interesting thought. Adams, you were supporting what you heard serendipity say. Did you want to maybe build on that and perhaps respond to what Anson said?
Give me a second. Sorry, I'm in the store.
Look, there's I'm not nowhere near as educated on this as Anthony or even Jonathan, but the gut tells me that you think of war, you think of allies, right? So drugs are all over, and the cartels just bring drugs to America. They have dealings all around the world, at least the big cartels, right? So it would be one of those situations where, just like a war, you need allies around the world to combat the takeover of these governments, where these cartels are in the government. And yeah, it's very complicated. I don't know how to answer this.
Created NATO to impede international drug trafficking. Is what
Yes, because yeah, and you have to choose wisely because they have all the money, right? The corruption. Corruption is people being bribed and paid off to go against this type of a mission like this. But again, I think it has to be a global thing. Yeah.
Do you think we should talk about the role that China plays in the fentanyl getting to Mexico before the fentanyl makes it into the drugs that come across the border that Americans are addicted to? Maybe we should talk about the role that China plays and what we can do about that, and maybe even talk about is this China's retaliation for what we did, bringing opium to them? Too soon?
Well, when you see how people respond to the fentanyl, the zombie apocalypse in major U.S. cities where people are just lurched over, I smoke cannabis and I drink alcohol, beer and wine and sometimes vodka. I don't think it's good for my health, but I still enjoy the way it makes me feel. But I'm not lurched over in a street. That drug is particularly destructive, and it does seem like that is an attack on our population. And if we have selfless kindness and love for our fellow citizens, we shouldn't allow them to even have access to it. Or we should. See, I think you can play both sides of the fence here and never really find a real good solution. And I apologize for doing that oratory of reading, from a script. But I think, if I hate to go off topic, but if the room doesn't look at this as a philosophical topic as well, I think there's a big point to miss about freedom of choice. But, I also believe that housing in a country $37 trillion in debt should have been a priority. There shouldn't be homelessness per se at scale. If you go to usdebtcollector.org, they say we only have 700,000 homeless in this country. Bullshit. There are millions upon millions. I think it's probably like 10 million, maybe, Americans are technically homeless. There's just so many variables to deal with, I feel like, and this is always like an all or nothing question. Should we end the war on drugs, or should we use the military to deploy? I mean, can you imagine if the U.S. Air Force starts doing strikes on the southern border against narco terrorist assets, their facilities, their growth fields, their distribution routes? When does the war end? We need peace, and that's why I say philosophy is important, because if you're not exhibiting a positive vibration like Mojo, and maybe the mods, we'll never have peace in this country. We will have perpetual war and debt until the eventual eruption, destruction, implosion. We will eat our own substance out by being neurotic and engaging in nonstop warplay, gameplay of that nature. We need to focus on business, and a good business doesn't involve airstrikes all around the world 24/7. Obama's hope and change was a lie. He enhanced the number of strikes globally, deployed Predator drones to every major, city that he was doing, and launched. What I'm saying is, we need peace now. That's my opinion. I am complete.
All right, Roger, sorry.
So, go right ahead, jump on in.
Yeah, so I'm actually at the tail end of my lunch break right now. But here's what I will say. I do believe that the military should be fighting the war on drugs. I 100% agree with serendipity in that law enforcement, both on a local level and a federal level, have failed miserably. They've allowed themselves to become corrupted themselves as organizations. They've allowed to pass as they continue to protect their own without looking at the aims of protecting the American public. I do believe that more lethal force should be sanctioned at the border. You know, when you do identify that there's certain people that are moving across certain cartels' trade lines, I believe that the military should take whatever form of actions up and including to death in preventing those people from coming over the border. And as far as the drug dealers are concerned, you know, I'm tired of these shootouts, you know, these standoffs. Send a grenade in there, blow the whole place up, send them back down to hell, and let it be done with. If you are accused and convicted of selling drugs to somebody's teenager that resulted in death, you should be given the death penalty. And I think that there should be given a certain fast track around our Constitution in putting you to death sooner. So until we actually adopt these type of attitudes of really taking this situation by control, of really holding people accountable in terms of what their contribution into this mess is and how it's affected society, and render the same level of consequences, I think that people would take a second thought before setting up at your school's neighborhood bus stop and selling drugs to 13-year-olds. I mean, I don't know. What do you guys think about that?
Should we fight the war on drugs by increased severity of legal penalties, and should we take it as far as the use of lethal force by the military or by law enforcement? Lethal force, increase the authority for lethal force in order to better deal with the war on drugs. I can tell you, I adamantly oppose that, but I sure would like to hear somebody supportive of, and I respectfully do that, Doctor. I oppose it, but I sure would like to hear somebody endorse it.
So I'm going to endorse it from the standpoint of experience.
Wait a minute. I asked for somebody else.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
Okay. This is supposed to be a conversation, folks, not just a two-way debate.
And Anson, sorry, I was stepped away. What was your question that you wanted an answer to?
Should we better fight the war on drugs by dramatically enhancing legal penalties, including use of the death penalty, and using lethal force on the border and in our streets, increasing the use of lethal force in order to better fight the war on drugs? That's essentially what Doctor was advocating. I'm not going to go point by point to rebut that, but I sure would like to hear somebody, if they endorse or oppose what the doctor just proposed.
Gotcha. Well, I'll say real quick before somebody else wants to go. Apparently, California has of this year Prop 36 addresses specifically that, where if prosecutors are able to pinpoint an OD, mostly around fentanyl, but I'm guessing it's around other drugs as well, to the dealer, they potentially could be charged for homicide, or at least involuntary manslaughter.
But that is using existing laws with more rigor. It is not increasing this. It is not using the laws to increase legal penalties and use of lethal force in our streets and on the borders.
I could answer this for you, Captain. Sir, with all due respect, I would disagree with it. But I would agree with you if it's the only plan to target cartels and not fundamentally work with the Mexican government to help shore up some of their in some facet to help build their economy so that the people could work. But sir, with all due respect, these cartels traffic, kidnap, ransom, torture. They take wholesale groups of people, and I don't know, sir. Like if I have received that order, I have no problem sending them to go meet Davy Jones, and I would do it gladly over and over again, just because of the level of violence and human degradation that they bring onto the world. I don't know if it would fix America without other internal policies. I'll leave that for the people that are smarter than me. But as somebody, I would say, let me at them, sir, and I promise you they won't cross a single line.
Would you use that same, if you were ordered to go into the streets of America to do what you just suggested we do, as opposed to going across, or were you restricting your comments to moving across the border to engage with the cartels in their own territory in Mexico?
I would never want someone like me deployed on the streets of America. Americans don't want me on the streets of America trying to go target people. I'd leave that up for the domestic forces. You would want us, or and particularly you, guys like you, to target outside of that. That's our role. That's our area. Like internally, that's up to the people here. You have to decide what kind of stances and policies you want domestically. But should we bring in people that are, should we allow these people to prey upon our citizens, rape them, kill them, murder them, torture them, and put them in, it kind of irks me on that. I say let us go and draw the line at our borders and let the domestic policies take out.
Yeah, so I want to jump into this real quick. So we have models that look much different than the U.S. model. If you look at, for example, Portugal, where they legalized drugs, but they also destigmatized it and opened up a lot of rehab facilities to make sure that they could help people that suffer from addiction. This was the Portugal approach, which was very libertarian in their desire to allow people to do what they want to do, but offer them the help that they might need. If you compare that to a zero tolerance policy, such as Singapore, where they have harsh penalties, small amounts of drugs will result in many years in prison and even being caned. They also have random drug testing for the individuals, as well as compulsory rehabilitation. If you are caught utilizing drugs for the first time, they will put you in rehab and even offer long-term supervision after your release. They also have strict border and customs enforcement to prevent it coming in at the border. Something that we don't care what comes in this border. And I won't get too political, but it seems like we turn a blind eye to everything that is at our border, whether it's drugs, whether it's people, it doesn't seem to matter. And so I guess I would just throw this out there that when looking at these approaches, Singapore's got the zero tolerance. They didn't have to go and send their troops into other countries. They were just able to take very drastic measures within their borders, which has resulted in probably the lowest drug use that you'll see of any country on planet Earth. Feel free to respond anytime.
I don't know if those models would actually work with the Mexican cartels or the Canadian cartels, for the few that are doing their stuff up north. I don't know if that model would actually work over here with the stranglehold and the weaponry that the cartels have. I mean, let's not forget, the cartels actually have a significant stake in agricultural products, so they're shipping them over mixed with their drugs, but of course they're sending over agricultural products. I think we could lock down the border. I think we could do a better job in the Gulf. And I think domestically you could say, hey, we're gonna remove some of these scheduled drugs, and you're gonna do you. It hasn't looked so great in Oregon, Portland particularly. I do know Portugal is suffering some problems. It hasn't gone quite as smoothly as people like to elaborate. So I don't know what the correct answer is, but I don't think people should be in prison because whatever they want to do to their body, they should be free. But I also don't think we should have the Mexican cartels hooking people on and then killing them with fentanyl or other drugs, as well as trafficking kids and arms and weapons and money. Like all of that combined, I feel these cartels prey not only on the Mexican citizens, but also on United States citizens. And I think we can do better cooperation with Mexico and even the Central American countries at large.
I've got a quick question for you, Brad. If Mexico and Canada take strong exception to you and me as military members going across their borders to fight the cartels, how do you deal with that? And second, I would observe that this whole discussion has been centered about how we can reduce the supply side of the equation. I have yet to hear, other than legalization, even that doesn't do it. How do you address the demand side?
So I'm not a psychologist or a doctor on this. Sir, you and I both know the sea lanes and the seas well enough to know that how they're getting them across. I mean, I literally am looking at a map on my wall that has my old routes on it, and from the interventions and the targets that we had. I mean, we know what they're doing. We know how they're doing it. We know what types of crafts they're using. It's not hard to just go ahead and do it. And if the countries don't want us there, we can do simply what we did to North Korea. We can just contain them and corral them into a port. We can lock down the land barrier that's ours, and they can just make all the cocaine they want to. It's just not going to be sold anymore. And we can definitely achieve that. I mean, some of it will get smuggled, but we could achieve it. As far as domestically getting people off drugs, I don't know. America's weird. It's not like other nations. We're never happy with just what we have. It has to be bigger, better, faster, stronger, or more potent. I mean, we went from peace, love, dope, and marijuana in the 60s to now, like, I mean, the 80s was like full-blown coke, and now we're talking about fentanyl. And it seems every 10 years, 20 years, it seems like something bigger, better has to come along for Americans. We're just never happy with just a simple joint. Even marijuana is not marijuana from the 60s. Today, that shit is, good luck with that. You're not going to find that. I've never heard people talk about THC levels and how excited they are to walk around like a zombie just from inhaling or taking in THC. So, I mean, I don't know. How to treat the domestic side, I really don't know. Maybe make it legal, but making beer legal didn't cure alcoholism. So I don't think making drugs is going to solve that problem.
I wanted to come up and give the perspective of someone that is on the supply side, the traffic side, most of it, because we don't produce, but I am in Guatemala, so we don't produce the drug, but we are the number one gateway of it towards the United States. So I put in a picture on the chat that I uploaded to my iCloud, so that you can watch. It's a very old picture from, I believe it was Inside Crime that did it. A full report that since has been probably censored, but that was years ago. That was 2019, and it still is the situation. So most of the South America production of the drugs come through Guatemala, and yeah, that was one piece of data that you probably wanted to know.
Show their true identity, especially women, online. But it's the difference between Gary Scott and Allen and Dismal.
That's interesting. Could you help us understand the importance of Guatemala? Like the map shows, obviously, if
South America production into the United States. So it's shipped here through submarines or mostly flights, and also um, by land. But if you see all those are the routes, the known routes by law enforcement of shipments, and well, I think it speaks for itself.
Hey, this is Congressman candidate John. I'd like to interject some new information into this conversation. It is relevant and topical. The U.S. national debt is now at 37 trillion, and the U.S. total debt, which is unfunded debt and interest, is 105 trillion dollars. So if you want to go to war and fund trillions of dollars to go to war to do airstrikes on narco-terrorist assets facilities in Mexico and other countries, because it's not just going to be Mexico. They've got targeting destinations all around the Caribbean, I'm sure. And now that they put a $50 million bounty out on the head of Venezuela, there's a lot of assets that can be targeted by our beautiful and multi-trillion dollar Air Force. The question is opening Pandora's box in our best interest, or is fiscal responsibility, prudence, and common sense in our best interest and the true nature of self-defense, which is, buying what you can afford and being frugal and prudent, as opposed to just spending trillions and trillions and trillions of more dollars on forever war against narco-terrorists? Is it worth it? Oh, I forgot to say I am complete.
There are leaders in the, you get people like Anthony Robbins, Dr. Joe Dispenza, and others that could make a difference in mental health around the country, and starting with young people learning new ways of approaching life without, religion doesn't have to be ostracized in this way, because a lot of people that are religious use these kind of ways and approaching life, right? And when you talk about the usage of the drugs, most people, like you said earlier, John, smoke a little weed, you drink a little bit, and it's not that good for you, but you're not an addict. You're not someone that has to sell his house to feed his addict. So I do think it should be legal, and I do think these kind of people I mentioned, if they're working with the government, they would be able to influence families and children in a different way, that the end result of it really would be that it would be pretty transformational, and that
I thought the Night's Watch might make a man of you. Managed to stay soft.
His religion on somebody. It would be something where families would be involved, children would be involved, and it would be common sense, because it's science and data, and the proof's in the pudding right there. So what would happen is just the knowledge of it is one thing, but then the practice of it is another. It's like going to the gym. Yeah, you should go to the gym, but do you go? Right? So the follow through with these kind of different intentions would take a while, but it would be such common sense that families would want their children to understand these kind of principles and these kind of exercises
I want to let all the racist white people in this room know that your next president is going to be a black woman, and I know that's triggering to you, but I
Come on my eyelashes, Kamala Harris. You didn't have black women. Wait, is he taken? Is it a white man?
It would be much more clear about who you are, what your dreams are, and what is their way, and how to get those dreams. Because most people walk around a little empty, you know. And the reason why there's this, one of the reasons there are people that engage a little bit too much is because they're trying to chase that happiness and chase that emptiness. So that, I think, would be, I don't like to use the word war.
I think it would be more awareness and enlightenment coupled with, like what Brad was talking about, isolating these cartels. I'm complete.
Can I just say,
Go ahead, John.
I always like to ask the question: if you were king or emperor, or the number one guy, and you were looking after your tribe, your people, what are your priorities, for your people? And to me, if I'm sitting in the Oval Office and I'm the president, I'm thinking, how am I going to help the people of my nation? What can I do with them? Fighting drug cartels is not on my top 10 list of to-dos. There's a lot of other problems, and you can just come on Clown House and take a quick sample of the general audio and communication that's happening here, and know that education is really malignant. It's just not there. I'm lucky I can communicate clearly and speak English. One of the rules of this house is that you have to speak English. And, that communication is what allows for transactions and really a de-conflict, a de-escalation of friction in society. I'm just saying that spending trillions of dollars to expand forever wars is not in the financial long-term positive vibration of our people. We have to be very mindful of the books now at 37 trillion. We can't plunge trillions, and we can't keep spending $2 trillion a year that we don't have.
Thank you, John. Timac, I believe you are contributing to the conversation by exploring the demand side and seeking with uncertainty how to better control the demand side. And I agree that it's confusing, it is difficult. But somebody also said something related to prohibition, which I found kind of interesting as I thought about it. Prohibition was designed to drastically reduce the ravages of excessive use of alcohol in the country, and it failed miserably. And ever since Prohibition, as far as I know, about 20%, 10 to 20% of the population suffer from alcoholism. And the country has pretty much accepted that. If we illegalize drugs, I wonder what do we find that maybe 5, 10, 15% of the country, many of them that are already suffering from alcoholism, do we accept that ravaging of the nation and comply with John's admonition to spend our money better somewhere else?
The great republic of
I wish I could get on board with the legalization, but I just, as a mom, my mind keeps going back to the kids, and the thing of it is we already have an epidemic of over-medicating our kids with illegal medication. What are the ramifications of opening up this whole new world to them where you're suddenly combining, parents don't teach their kids to cope anymore. They give them a pill for it. And then you combine that with the use of legalized illicit drugs. What are we looking at doing to our future generations? Like this, that's the part I can't get around,
what
making that access easier.
What if I offered you an alternative here where first of all, we have zero tolerance of narcotics at the border. I think that should be a start. And the legalization piece, I think, hear me out, could be worked into the private sector where we make sure that the drugs are fentanyl free. But then what if instead of, to alleviate your concern that you don't want your kids doing it, what if we sectioned off a portion of the United States? Let's just, for the sake of argument, we'll call it Barstow, California. And if we were to just deem that a drug zone, and then say that it's basically Singapore-style drug regulations outside of that zone, and then Portugal-style, smoke them if you got them, if you're within the confines of Barstow. And we only allow adults into Barstow, and so kids would not have access to it. It's people that would opt, if you want to be a drug addict, if that's your choice, we will move you. You have two options. We can either get you rehab or we send you to Barstow. What do you think of that plan?
How about an island off the Pacific?
I think that's pretty much the same thing, because Barstow is an island between LA and Los Angeles. The desert oasis, if you will. Adams, do you like that idea? That we legalize it in Barstow? Adams is busy. Okay, he does not like that idea. So Adams seems to be more in line with the policies of like Singapore, like the zero tolerance thing. I think it was good though. And Moose, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. We have people that are across the political spectrum, maybe not equal representation, but it sounds like there's a couple of people that want to open up the possibility of using U.S. troops, but across the political spectrum, we're getting a larger agreement that using troops is the wrong thing. Do you think that's interesting that we're finding consensus across the political spectrum, Moose?
Yeah, I guess I was surprised that there wouldn't be more folks that were pro-military, intervention in the Nixon's infamous, war on drugs. I also find it interesting though too. Actually, I'm glad that Serendipity brought up that point about legalized drugs and how schools and psychiatrists and parents are just quick to give the pill. Or really addressing the issue with the child or adults. No one's really mentioned the opioid crisis that the country went through. All the legalized drugs that doctors were writing scripts for left and right. And where was the accountability? What was it? The Purdue farmer, the Sackler family. They paid a couple of billion.
Money prescribing opiates.
Yeah, and I think that it was a slap in the wrist. I mean, a couple of billion for them is like, a cup of coffee for most people in this room. So, it's like.
So essentially now, doctors have gone to the extreme where essentially, pardon my hyperbole, but if you don't walk into the ER with a gunshot wound, it's like trying to get a painkiller. Because now they're overcorrecting because of the opioid crisis. It's like, you're not gonna. I'm not gonna be the doctor that I'm gonna be responsible for hooking them on. And so that's sad because now there are plenty of people that do live with chronic pain, have legitimate issues that are not drug addicts. That it's quality of life, and so when we do as society is overcorrect to the point of where those folks who really need it have a much bigger. It's just far more difficult for them to get it, versus when they were keeping it out like M&Ms and popcorn. But for some reason there wasn't really a lot of critique or scrutiny around the folks who were abusing the opioid crisis because it was legal. It wasn't, apparently coming over the borders. again, hospitals use fentanyl on the regular. Obviously, they're not using it to the doses that those zombies use it in these cities that are using it, of course. We hear about fentanyl appearing in marijuana. So it's, what is, so if you're going to address the war on drugs, where is there's been some talk about rehab. I think Mojo, you were talking about, I think it was in Portugal, went with the libertarian approach of, more mercy. The drugs aren't the problem, the addiction is the problem. Well, I think that is usually one of the main divides between the left and the right versus no, you're using an illegal drug. Typically the agenda point on the right and the left is like, no, they just need help, they just have an addiction, and there has to be something in the middle that says...
Moose, have you been to an open-air drug market in a major U.S. city and seen what it looks like?
Anyway, that's really about it, but I found it hard to ignore that the opioid crisis we just sort of glazed over that. And many Americans, young and old, lost their lives to addiction, their homes, families. But again, they were legal, so it wasn't really that big.
Well,
Until they couldn't get the pills anymore, and they started having to go for the regular street drugs. You take, for example, oxy, but often parlay into heroin. Because you couldn't get the actual pills anymore, and so folks would resort to black market stuff. Which, I guess is a reason for drug legalization. I think as long as there are things to smuggle, there will be a cartel. Before it was guns, drugs, and people, it was cattle. Before it was cattle, it was cotton confederacy. Before it was alcohol, then cotton, then cattle. Point being, as long as there's been a border, there's been smuggling. So there will be some sort of smuggling organization that exists along the border between the United States and Mexico, no matter what we do. The question is, how large is it and what effect does it have? There will always be some organization that does that work.
I want to provide Mojo just provided a brief summary. I want to provide my own, if I may. First, I want to really thank Mojo for starting this room. This is the first time. And I echo what Moose said in two areas. That we have reached a substantial agreement across political lines. 85% think we should carefully and prudently legalize drugs. And at least that percentage, though we didn't have a vote, suggests that the use are opposed to the use of military forces to fight specifically the cartels, but I don't think we need to, we didn't talk about it, but I think, generally speaking, the solution to the drug problem is not the use of military forces on the part of the United States. And there seems to be an emerging consensus in the room for that. And I hate the Great Divide. And when we can find a way to talk ourselves in an hour to consensus on some difficult subjects, I applaud the attempt to do that. And I certainly am going to do what I can to continue that effort. I had some other profound thought, but I'm so old it slips my mind unless I write it down. But I think, this discussion
added to other questions for for another room. Specifically, if we want to talk about drugs again, which we may or may not do. But we could now break it down based upon what I've heard in this room and have a room to say, how can we better improve the supply side, i.e. the prevention of the introduction of drugs into American society? What are the solutions to applying, doing whatever we have to do on the supply side, and then have another room on the same topic of how can we better address the demand side. And I don't, I'm just saying, I'm happy that this Mojo, Roger, that we've made at least an incremental step in a direction that I've been hoping for, specifically to find a way to moderate the Great Divide. And I appreciate your efforts in doing it, and I'll continue to support it.
No, I appreciate it. Appreciate you, Anson. I think this has been a good room, and we'll keep it going for another 30 minutes, and then I've got to do some things. So I want to make sure that anyone that wants to contribute gets an opportunity to do that now. Anyone that hasn't had a chance to speak, or if you've spoken before and you want to add some thoughts, please jump in.
I would like to add that I think you're at the brink of understanding the whole problem, and it's going to show to be a domestic problem. It is my belief, and I have very good reasons to think that the drug cartel, the principal drug cartel in the world, is the CIA and the intelligence agencies of the powerful nations in the world. So if you fix that, if you abolish the CIA, that would be a good day.
Anybody want to push back on abolishing the CIA?
I'll push back on it by describing or changing the perspective on it. It's not so much a drug cartel, but it's power structures. And I would favor the intelligence agency of my country in control of the power structure over that of what is essentially a terrorist organization. There could be a distinction without a difference between the two, but maybe I just have a bias. To say that tongue in cheek.
Can I just push back against it, actually, Roger?
Yeah, go right ahead.
I just want to quote the 29th verse of the Tao Te Ching. This is Chinese psychology. It's really the theory about doing nothing, that there's not a speck of dust out of place in the whole universe. I just think it's, at the CIA, at the FBI, at the IRS, it's probably a leadership and education, a wokeism problem. But this is the 29th verse. Does anyone want to take the world and do what he wants with it? I do not see how he can succeed. The world is a sacred vessel which must not be tampered with or grabbed after. To tamper with it is to spoil it, and to grasp it is to lose it. In fact, for all things there is a time for going ahead and a time for following behind, a time for slow breathing and a time for fast breathing, a time to grow in strength and a time to decay, a time to be up and a time to be down. Therefore, the clubhouse sage avoids all extremes, excesses, and extravagances. I am complete.
You know what I appreciated about this room most is in the beginning with Anson clarifying that we need to agree that there is a problem. If we agree there is a problem, then we can start to define better what the problem is specifically, and then we can get into solutions. And I think people have done a good job of illustrating that not only is there a supply side problem, there's a demand side problem, and I appreciate that nuance. There's also other approaches, alternatives to sending U.S. troops to fight drug cartels I would just like to submit, though, that when I talk about favoring legalization of drugs, it's not because I think people ought to use them. It's that when I look at the results of what happened in Portugal, the long-term use actually decreased. And I don't think that's something we should ignore. I think we should actually try to better understand how is it that you made it legal, more easily accessible, and yet long-term use was reduced. I think we should better try to understand that. The other thing that I want to be careful of is I don't believe that reducing the amount of people that use drugs is even really the goal that I have in mind. If somebody wants to use drugs, like for example, if Keith Richards of the Rolling Stones decides that he wants to be in his hotel room and use illicit drugs, I don't really care about that. That's a personal choice that he can make. The problem that I have is the violence that's associated with obtaining the drugs. Because when you drive something into the underground, if you can't go to the police and if you can't utilize the courts, you're going to utilize a different system of justice. And this is why if you're selling crack cocaine on a rival street corner in the city of Baltimore, or you could pick whatever big city you'd like, this is where you have violence. And if you look at the gun violence in this country that people rail about when they talk about they want to restrict, your access to guns or, gun ownership rules, they forget that when you eliminate suicide and when you eliminate justifiable homicide, of the homicide rates, the majority of that is contained to about 6 city blocks in about 10 U.S. cities. That's the overwhelming majority. And so, and then if you ask yourself, well, what's causing the violence? It's not necessarily using the drugs, it's the business of selling drugs. So I think there's more to explore here, and I appreciate people not wanting their children to have access to these drugs. But just because something is bad for you doesn't necessarily mean that the right solution is to make it illegal. I would compare this in many ways to those that are trying to restrict sugar intake, for example. I'm opposed to that as well. I think that we should have the same laws for cocaine, for heroin, that we do for selling onions.
Mojo, with the Portugal experiment, did they really legalize all drugs across the board? Or what levels? How far did they go?
So they rolled it out over time, but before they did that, they offered a ton. And this is something that conservatives and myself probably have to struggle with, and this is why it failed in Portland. Is before they legalized it, they made sure that they had all of the courts aligned to be able to, instead of punish somebody and sentence them to a jail, to be able to give them the alternative to go rehab themselves. So if somebody found themselves in a courtroom over, or maybe they were in jail previously on drug charges, they got resentenced to go to rehab. And then what they did when they legalized it is they made these centers optional for you to check into. And what they found was there was a lot of people that wanted off, and by decriminalizing it, what they did was they destigmatized it. And so there's a problem that people have when they're an addict. It's not only that they're addicted to the substance and what they'll do to get the substance, which violates other laws, but the other thing is they don't like to raise their hand because of the stigma that's attached to it, because then people say, oh, they're a drug addict. And I think when you approach it with love and with
empathy, and you say, okay, we're going to suggest that, and give you all of the tools necessary, that if you don't want to use drugs, we're going to offer this to you. So I don't think we'd be able to successfully pull off the Portugal model unless we modeled everything that they did. And that started with making sure that they had adequate rehab and all of the other tools to handhold people, to make sure that if their choice was to avoid drugs, that they had those tools at their disposal.
I would, on one point, one part of that, Mojo, given the choice of incarceration or rehab. Rehab, in my view, is a joke in this nation. And we have made very little progress in figuring out how to rehab addiction. The best rehab that I think we found is, quite frankly, AA, and that percentage rate is pretty damn low. But many go to any AA room, and if there's 20 people in the room, there's going to be 2, 3, maybe 5 that are going to have their sheet signed by the moderator, by the guy that runs the room, so that they can prove to the judge that they're continuing to go to AA. If we want to make inroads into the demand side, I suggest that the mental health community needs to get its act together and develop a warp speed COVID-like program
to rehab people, which is a combination of psychology, medication, and medication. Just relying on the spiritual approach in AA is, as we've been doing for the last 80 plus years, is not going to get the percentages anywhere of success anywhere farther up the scale than we are right now. So I would suggest a major effort on the part of the mental health community to figure out how to better rehab addiction is a crying need in the country.
Well, I don't know if you're familiar with the studies that they do on mice, but what they found was that if you offer cocaine to mice, the ones that will go and utilize it are the ones that are not socialized with the other mice. Now, we don't know for sure if this plays out the same way with human beings, but it stands for reason that if you're isolated, if you're alone, if you don't have a social connection with people that are living law-abiding, traditional values in their life, I would imagine that if we could identify people that are isolated and make genuine attempts to end that isolation, that would be the best effort that we could make that would help people to resist the temptation of drugs. Because that study is very fascinating. That the thing that leads to the biggest predictor of which mice are going to use it are the ones that have already isolated themselves from the other mice.
It is kind of fascinating. Although I think I would imagine it's case specific though. I could see that working for fentanyl. Fentanyl users, I've never done it, but my understanding is you're not looking to be loquacious and be socialized. You're essentially looking to nod out, nod off. But the other drugs that were very conducive to partying and the rave scene and Molly and cooking the 80s, the stockbrokers doing coke at lunch and Molly to go to raves and ecstasy and all that. I think it would be case specific. Similarly, I think marijuana is unique in that way because I think there's a lot of stoners that are very antisocial, and they just zone out at home doing their thing, playing video games, whatever it is. But
some people read books. I'm just saying that people use drugs for performance enhancement, experience enhancement, and Big Pharma pumped trillions of dollars worth of experimental mRNA vaccines into our bodies, and I think that a room that has an all or nothing title is generally clickbait, and I'm just saying that if you were to do a full assessment and expand your scope, you would see that this small little room title, which deals with a very specific, operation, because it could be global. It doesn't just have to be Mexico. Couldn't it be, the heroin distributors from Afghanistan or Italy? Like, where does the war end on fighting international narcotic smugglers and terrorists?
Where it ends, we don't know. Where it starts with identifying that it's a problem.
Well, the thing is, people used the drugs in an application, like Moose just said, in the rave. In the 80s, it was the blow, it was the discotheque. I mean, if anybody here doesn't understand the moral dilemma with vice and police activities or monopolies of drug distribution, you have to think about human behavior, human science. People want that dopamine. Clown House is a safe, medical device technology app to get your speakers dopamine. But people that go out on a Friday and Saturday night, a lot of those people use even more chemicals to enhance their experience. I think it's a waste of the chemical. I'm just saying I like the book club.
But you're also not considering, and maybe you have, it's not just, as you know, John, the ravers and the partiers. We have a number of drug users who turn to drugs to cope due to trauma, depression, insecurities, but primarily due to trauma. So as long as you have people who use drugs to cope, to mask their pain from trauma, childhood abuse, et cetera, it's going to be very hard to crack down on this war of drugs. Part of the war. People who need the drug, people who don't want mental health help, who don't want rehab, who go through rehab and fail because they're in a lot of pain. And
No, I get it.
drugs is their only recourse.
It's a short-term solution to a long-term problem. What I'm saying is, if you're going to use a drug, you might as well enhance your long-term outcome by using the drug responsibly. And in my opinion, a lot of people who use Adderall, many people use it, in college to study. That may not be that bad of an application of that drug to actually increase your intelligence. However, there's downsides to using Adderall. So it eats you away. It's methamphetamine. So there's an upside and a downside. It's a question is, what's your ROI on using that chemical in your body? Are you wasting it picking your toes in Poughkeepsie and playing, Clown House or PlayStation or reading comic books? I don't know. That's a personal liberty question you have to ask yourself. What am I doing right now?
You just said something that is brilliant. And I want to encompass it, and that is the real issue with addiction is the use of drugs to cope. The first step in the 12 steps is I became powerless over alcohol, and I was powerless over alcohol, and my life became unmanageable. I disagree, and I've got about 30 years of experience with this. I disagree with that, but I'm not going to rewrite the big book. My life became unmanageable, and then I became powerless over alcohol. If you address the unmanageability of an addict or a normal person's life, then you make tremendous strides in reducing the excessive use of drugs and alcohol. And I think you hit the nail on the head, NY, and I really appreciate that input.
Thank you, sir. I've dealt with it in my family. I've had family members who were addicts. And one particular family member who was very, very close to me, I spent a year helping them kick the habit. And they have been clean and sober for about 3 years now. I dare say it's one of my greatest accomplishments in life because I didn't think it was possible. And so I get it. And I know this person turned to drugs and alcohol to cope with a lot of grief, and trauma. And sometimes the mental health is not enough. The threat of death is not enough, to get them to get clean and sober. Incarceration is not enough. Sometimes tough love and patience win. So I just wanted to add that because John was mentioning the party element, and I didn't know if the mental health element had been discussed yet.
Yeah, as someone that had a drinking problem, I realized that undergirding that was a thinking problem. Uh, there were there were choices that I was making that led to me not being where I wanted to be at that time in my life, and by turning to alcohol, I didn't need to think about those things. I didn't need to think about, maybe, not achieving the level of income or success at that point in time in my life. That all came later. Um, but the alcohol, some of it was fun. Some of it was like, hey, let's just go out and have a good time. But the reality was, I was avoiding dealing with other issues that were. I was more comfortable with spending my like a ridiculous amount of money on alcohol, and spending all of my evenings overindulging, and then spending the next day recovering, because that was less of a problem to me than dealing with the fact of the real issues in life. Like, why did I underachieve here? Why did I fail there? Why am I not as competitive in the workplace? And then once I gave it some thought, the very thing that caused me to stop drinking alcohol was the thing that caused me to open up all kinds of avenues in my life, improving relationships with friends and family, financial success, all of those things. And so it's a thinking problem. And so I would say that where you find addiction, you've got something that precedes that led to the addiction, that made the addiction tolerable. And by the way, nobody starts out saying, hey, I want to be an alcoholic. You start out with like, I've had a bad day, I'm going to have some drinks. And then all of a sudden you have a pretty good evening. Now your next day is going to suck, but that just leads to more drinking because we've figured out a way to solve that problem. Then when you're having a good day, well, now you want to celebrate. And so then everything that happens becomes a reason to drink. And I don't have an addiction to other substances, so I don't want to speak on those things. All I can say is that as somebody that struggled with alcohol abuse, I would not want them to ban alcohol. I would just hope that people can be more thoughtful of like, why am I turning to this substance? And my life has improved dramatically since I stopped drinking. And so, open invitation, if anybody struggles with alcohol and they need somebody to talk to, you can back channel me. I'm happy to have that conversation.
I would like to offer a controversial contrarian position to the defense of alcohol in 2025.
Go right ahead.
So I think anything in excess is, dangerous. And there's a lot of people that work for alcohol distribution companies that live in Chicago. And there's a lot of bars and a lot of restaurants that sell an ice cold beer with a delicious slice of cheese pizza and pepperoni. And, that's part of society. I think, I told my mom the other day, I was like, Mom, why don't we just do a podcast and we'll call it Let's Complain About Everything and Be as Cheap as Possible. Because, like, to me, that's kind of a Protestant ethic. But the fact is that you can go to Walgreens right now and choose from 50 different cigarettes and buy any type of alcohol, liquor, wine, beer, and that shit is just as dangerous or as damaging as all the other drugs, really. I mean, some completely destroy your brain, but, in terms of enforcement, there is this double jeopardy with vice and police criminal activity and, gangs. But the fact that you can go to Walgreens and buy a publicly, approved of type of product, I'm just saying there's not a speck of dust out of place in the whole universe, but to send special forces overseas to conduct assassination, hits against narco-terrorists is very dangerous. And if you're a parent and your son is in the Army or the Marines and you want them to go over there and start killing narco-terrorists, Well, there's probably a better strategy. And if you play chess, you realize you don't sacrifice your soldiers in a futile attempt to control a drug marketplace. Work within your perimeter, secure a 360-degree perimeter, and work your way in. You don't work your way out of this solution, you work your way into this solution. You got to go within yourselves and in the country. I mean, I walk around Chicago, I don't even hear English. And if I was a bounty hunter and given a license to round up illegal aliens, well, you know what? I might start that business opportunity, but we don't have a free and open marketplace. We have a controlled economy. It's all based on fiat currency. Anyways, I could go on, but I love the room, and I hope you've all enjoyed this incredible rational discussion group. I am complete.
Hey, Mojo and Anson, sounds like you both have had your journey with alcohol. I give you both kudos. And Jennifer, I think those doing the chat. It's funny. I think part of the problem with addiction, particularly with alcohol, is because it is socially acceptable, right? If you're single, you go on a date, yeah, sure, you can meet up for a cup of coffee, but on the average, I think it's safe to say most people will go and meet up for a drink, for the icebreaker. You're going to go to after work happy hour with coworkers. So it's easy, it's easy to not recognize that maybe you're doing too many happy hours. Maybe those happy hours have gone from coworkers to happy hour by yourself at home. And it's interesting because I heard some stories. I've got a regular Friday night poker game, very low stakes, like $20, with everybody but me. They're all AA. I'm what they call their token normie. I'm able to open up a bottle of wine, have one glass, and that's it. Maybe not drink for a week, a month, 6 months, whatever. The beer moves me. But yes, some of their stories and some of their rock bottom stories, many of them realize that they're lucky to be alive. I think most of it was alcohol abuse, but there's definitely those who dabbled in the old school heroin and junkies, and literally when they're robbing people to get their fix, right? So I always have high respect for those that were like, you know what, whatever the addiction may be, this is not working, right? And then Mojo, you outlined things that weren't working for you, and I think that is, what did Shakespeare say above all else? Know thyself. So it's, obviously fentanyl is a problem, but I do think there is an underestimation of the problem with alcoholism in this country because it is socially acceptable.
Yeah, the socially acceptable part is interesting because what I would do is go to these places that would be socially acceptable, and that would be my most moderate time of drinking because I knew that the people that are there, even now I wouldn't preach temperance to anyone. If you like to drink, go ahead and drink. My issue wasn't with the alcohol; it was the inability to stop drinking, and that was because I had other things going on, and so it wasn't about having a drink socially. It was about it was about escaping, and so when I would go to happy hours and had to be professional, I would have a different type of drink. I would drink something that I don't fully enjoy, so I know I could sip on it, so I could be socially acceptable. And then as soon as the people that might frown upon more heavy drinking are gone, that's when you would dial it up. So the happy hour was just kind of a pre-fade for me typically.
And it's so common and so pervasive in society. That's not a unique story, Raj. It's that's the thing, right? And yeah.
So, in response to the whole legalizing drugs versus what we went through with prohibition and alcohol now being legal, out of curiosity, I looked up the stats on
alcohol addiction versus drug addiction, whereas alcohol being socially acceptable impacts, according to the WHO globally, 400 million adults, whereas drug addiction impacts between 60 and 70 million. So do you think that legalizing drugs would increase that stat?
Well, again, you'd have to look at places that have taken this approach, and one such instance would be Portugal, where long-term drug use has declined. Would that happen here? Probably not. I think that we would fuck it up. We'd find a way. I think a more applicable study would be what happened in Portland, and we would probably screw it up because you can't just change the law, making it legal without doing the other things that Portugal did that allowed sobriety to be a choice that people opted for. And I think, in fact, what happened is when Portland legalized it, you just saw people from different parts of the country, and specifically different parts of the Pacific Northwest, move to Portland so they can feed their addiction. So I do think that you'd have to be careful in this approach, and I would love to see solutions that would lead to a decrease in use. Singapore's figured that out, but I don't think any of us would be too comfortable with the types of laws that Singapore has put in place. I don't think anybody here would want to subject themselves to random drug testing the way that Singapore does. And so we talk about how we want to solve this issue, but we'd be comfortable doing the things that other places have done that have led to a dramatic reduction, almost completely eradicating these types of issues.
Can I ask a question? Just, I said it before, but logically here. Who thinks that a two-pronged approach attack to go exterior or interior? I think just going interior, to me, is the smarter, logical approach to the war on drugs. Who here thinks a multi-pronged attack, going internationally, engage in military and violent confrontations, possibly killing thousands of civilians in the process? Who here thinks that a multi-pronged approach is a better solution? Thank you. I am complete.
I don't prefer a multi-pronged approach, but I'll go the other side and say external. So I think if you're in Washington and you're looking down the barrel and you're sticking your tax dollars in a cartridge and you're looking at targets, can I kill maybe 500 people who are involved in a terrorist industry? Just drugs being one of the products. Or can I get between the civilians within my country and the 6 feet around them and change their lives with the tax dollars? Which one can I provide more influence to? Can I get between my neighbor and their coping mechanism? Or can I interrupt temporarily, fully understand that, temporarily some of the trafficking operations, whether they be drugs or people or other things that are harmful and are a threat to our democracy?
But do we live in a democracy, or is it a representative republic? And is it a Republican form of government?
The latter.
But doesn't the Constitution say we should have a Republican form of government? What does that mean in the Constitution?
Here's the thing, though. I don't think that America will ever win this war on drugs, the so-called war on drugs, because there's always going to be a demand for supply. Even if you killed every cartel leader known currently, I believe there are new cartel leaders being, shape-shifted and molded and ready for tomorrow, right? I think drugs is profitable. For our government, for certain government, certain politicians. I think there's a lot of money to be made. There's a lot of corruption, a lot of drug money fuels corruption, and I'm not sure that our government is ready to kind of in that money flow, right? I think as long as we have people who want to engage in drugs, whether it be for medicinal reasons or to party, there's always going to be a demand for the supply, and I don't
in the United States, you can't do that. It's a violation of the Eighth Amendment.
Well, Singapore did just that, Nye, and they are winning. And I think that maybe what we should look at is the fact that after 50 years of declaring a war on drugs, maybe we should look at the battlefield and recognize and wave the white flag and say we lost the war on drugs. I would argue that the drugs won.
I agree.
I don't think we're done with the war. I've been listening for a lot, and there's, like, I mean, even taking your Portugal model, like, everyone highlights this. Portugal targets traffickers to a very strong extent. They limit the amount of supply. They went from 5 to 10 day supply. They removed synthetic drugs off of the list. You still can be prosecuted. They still have, very strict drug laws on their country. But bringing it in as a drug trafficker, that's a very serious effect. And we can impose things. And we should be wanting to elevate, like, barring human trafficking into the country. I hope everybody is against that. We don't want, illegal substances of any kind. We don't want people smuggling in illegal firearms into our country. That's a huge issue. We don't want that to go on. We don't want, people smuggling in foods that may kill us, may damage us, may give us diseases, may destroy crops. We already have a problem with that in several areas. We have invasive species because of our lax regulations in some of these areas. I like the multi-pronged approach. I don't think we've lost the war on drugs because I don't know how bad it would have gotten. As somebody who grew up around the 80s and 90s, I don't know how bad that would have actually turned out. I don't know if not having some kind of constraint on that, if that would have elevated and spread across the country in more ways than one, or if everybody would have this utopian view of everybody's getting along, it would be fantastic. I really don't know. I don't have the answer to that. But I would say, going after a lot of the producers in Colombia.
Maybe they could turn it into a legal business. Maybe they could have a joint venture to ensure that their product is safe, and they could build an economy off of that. And if you want to make it legal for cocaine, it's just cocaine, and it's been through the maker, and it's got checks and balances on it, and we can ensure that there's no fentanyl and not killing them. Maybe it would help them. Maybe that's a better avenue to go. We don't have to necessarily blow up everybody. But I think right now, with what we have with the cartels and the militant and military mindset that they have in terms of this, you're not going to break them because they'll come after anybody else. You have to actually break them in order to pursue your domestic policy because they will still try to find a way to work around it. They've been successful. The U.S. used the banks in Florida during the cocaine epidemic to basically boost the U.S. economy. There's more banks that were popping up in Florida than any other point in our country's history. And some of them are still around today, and they're all cocaine banks. So, you can handle all the things you want domestically, but you have to break that terrorist approach, and you have to patrol your borders. You're going to have to really step up, because otherwise, all the domestic policies are going to mean shit unless you have a strong enforcement on the policies you actually care about, and you're willing to commit action. So it's hard.
And politicians really were to say, hey, let's get rid of the cartels. We don't need them south of the border. We could have that done within a couple months. That's not that long. It's not a forever war. And we could definitely wipe out a lot. Most of them are even fighting amongst themselves right now because they're falling apart. But if we could keep the head off of that snake and not let them coalesce, it'll make short work of what we have right now. It's not that difficult to perceive.
Hey, John, you asked a good question. If I was king, how would I allocate the resources? And this is basically you're asking, should we internal means fix the demand side, and external means fix the supply side? And if I was king, I would say 70-30 on the demand side, and very careful management of the resources of what that 70% is. To just say, I'm going to spend a lot of money on mental health not as specific management of the addiction problem and the drug problem, I would say that a substantial part of that 70% must be carefully targeted within the mental health allocation of resources to specifically address addiction related to alcohol and drugs, and how best to prevent it in the first place through good mental health practices like helping with depression and so forth, and then not squandering all those resources, scarce resources, for other areas of mental health that should, I'm not saying ignore them, but I'm saying the money that we devote to mental health to specific, should be specifically addressed to the amount of money dealing with addiction to drugs and alcohol.
But what is mental health but education? If you're so stupid to go to Costco and Walmart and buy giant jugs of vodka and drink them every single night in your 60s, I mean, is that the smartest thing to do for your health? You know, this is not an economic dilemma, in my opinion. You can't look at supply side and demand percentages. To me, I think you have to look at it from the opinion that there's not a speck of dust out of place in the whole universe. You know, it's...
Far few people, Mojo evidently thought his way through his issue. I have been I was unable to do that, and it was more than just thinking on my part, which ultimately became stinking thinking, and I'm a fairly intelligent guy, but my thinking was stinking. Therefore, I needed external help. Fortunately, I've availed myself of that, and it's helped me dramatically. So it's not just thinking your way individually through the solution. It is a mental health effort to teach people how to deal with the subject as the demons swirl around in their head. And just thinking about how to calm those demons down is nigh impossible for many addicts.
Well, I'm just saying temperance and abstinence, you know, are rooted in source information. I'm just saying I read a lot of books, and I have AA books, and they are so wise and beneficial, but reading it versus talking about it, I'm just saying from a public policy standpoint and a spending standpoint, to continue to borrow and spend to fund change overseas with regards to imports is a waste of our treasury. We have to be very careful how we spend the assets at the treasury, and Doge has eliminated almost $1 trillion now of woke spending education contracts. So we waste our money, and now we want to spend more money.
I want to try to stay on topic. Thank you.
I'm just saying to fight international drug cartels costs money, and the only way to get that money is to borrow it, and then you spend it. So unless you're all prepared to rubber stamp and sign your name on a piece of paper that says, I want to borrow $1.5 trillion to continue to fund the war on international narco-terrorists using our military and CIA with no supervision or transparency, and just write a blank check, there you go, spend it.
Thank you, John. We've heard that before.
I have a question, and I've never thought of it this way until I'm hearing these different opinions, but and I'm firmly in the camp that we don't use the military. But let's just say, as a thought experiment, we were going to use the military, and let's say we were going to take out the cartels, and let's say we were going to go and like incinerate the opium fields and utilize the military in a way that destroys the ability to create a supply of drugs in the first place. We could do that. We could do that. The problem that would then come from that is we're spending money to do it, right? We're probably not generating a lot of goodwill in doing that. An easier way, and maybe a more cost-effective way than sending troops, what if we just did what we do to farmers when we tell farmers that we don't want them to grow something? We give them a subsidy. And again, I'm not saying that this is an idea, but as a thought experiment, as an alternative to the federal government using troops to go kill these people, what if we just told the cartels, hey, how much money are you making off this stuff? Okay, what if we just paid you to not sell it? And infrastructure for them to not sell drugs.
So borrow and spend to encourage them to obey our laws? So blackmail them.
So, like, we tried this in the early 80s, or late 80s, early 90s. We tried doing some of this stuff, what you're suggesting in Central America.
Bribe them.
The problem with our, a lot, just highlighting one of the significant problems, is that the CIA and our United States government decided to become a player in amongst the drug trade. So we were, running guns and drugs and cash all around freaking Central America and flying them back and forth. If the U.S. government was to say, hey, I'm going to take a policy, we do not need these criminal cartels here. The Mexican people don't. I'm going to get with the Mexican government and I'm going to say, hey, we can help you. These are going to be issues. We're going to do it with you or without you. With you, what we can do is, I'm not going to destroy your land. I just want the cartels eliminated. I want the power structures and the power vacuums gone. We're going to seize those funds because primarily they come from the U.S. We'll make sure that we have agreements with you, and then we can open up trade relations. I'll subsidize you as long as you promise to proactively ensure that we don't have the rise of cartels here. Help stabilize that country. Do some investments. You're going to have to go ahead and do it. Instead of those subsidies going to the coca fields, which would be massive anyway, why not just sit there and say, hey, Mexico, let's start investing. Let's open up trades. Let's do this fair trade practice, and let's get this thing going and kicking off down the road. Now all of a sudden you have more benefits out of this than you would long term. The problem comes is when you allow the CIA to say, hey, we've got $1 billion in cash here that's literally being eaten by rats and it's floating in a barge. What do we do with this? And you park it offshore in a Cayman Island account. Now you've got major problems there. So if we were just to target that, say, hey, we're going to seize it and they're not going to get that money. And we're not going to fund you weapons. I won't conduct revolutions on there. I'm not going to give you other assets. We are just targeting the cartel leadership. The cartels will break, they'll run, and then the people can decide. I don't think a lot of people know what cartel, like living with a cartel is like. But if you ever want to, there's a couple of documentaries on it. There's some great journalistic on there, particularly by National Geographic. They can tell you, and it's not fun for these people. So it should be a human rights campaign for all those screaming about human rights. This would be one of them. I'm surprised that you don't have people protesting, saying in the street, like, save these villages and towns, because they literally live under the oppression of the cartels. And their children are threatened, their women are raped. Like, that stuff goes on for them. So I'm just confused as to why we want to spare the cartels.
There's a great documentary series, actually, Brett, Dirty Money. One of the episodes is exactly to your point you're talking about earlier with the banks and laundering. It's actually called Cartel Bank, HSBC, and how they have been laundering money for the Mexican cartel for decades. And essentially, were never held accountable. Couldn't follow the money, just politicians bailed them out. But the amount, there's the infamous scene in Scarface, where they're literally, you see the bank president looking out his window, Tony Montana and his henchmen are bringing in like duffel bags, like a convoy of duffel bags stuffed with cash to be laundered. You're like, it's just a movie. Nope, it's real.
Well, Brad, what are you suggesting? That the U.S. military be the Knights of the Round Table and liberate these people from these oppressive drug lords that control them and manipulate and abuse them? Is that really our responsibility? I'm asking a question.
When our own American citizens are threatened by here, I am not the one to sit back and say, let's just hold the curtains and double lock the front door and just hope it goes away. I'm more of the type of, I see the problem. It's been an ongoing problem. Why don't I just go out and kill the wolf? And then I don't have to run and hide from the wolf.
You're saying there's one wolf? There's a lot of wolves in this pack, right?
Doesn't matter. All I have to do is just keep hitting the head, and then anybody who wants to sit there and try to be the alpha, I can take them out. Our military, our men and women are really adept. I will give our men and women. If you gave us no holds barred, and you said, hey, I need you to take out like the Sinaloa cartel, I need you to target them. I'm giving it to you. I swear to
associated with that cartel stacked high, and that'll break it. And we can do that very easily. We could drop 3 Rangers in a country and destabilize an entire nation. And don't think we haven't. I mean, you have to actually think about this. We could, without the political involvement, without the tit for tat, without the corruption, if you really truly being that virtue of saying, hey, this is a threat on our border. This is a threat to another nation. This is under attack. Their government is.
Okay, the show's over. The mojo vibration has left the building.
People can't fight for themselves, and it's on our southern border. I say go out and let's kill the wolves. Like it's not that hard. Let's sign up. I mean,
right. But so let's say you take care of the Mexican problem, the Mexican cartel. But if I believe behind Mexico it's China, it's India, are the second and third largest importers of illegal drugs into this country. That's a little trickier logistics to handle.
But Moose, if I cut off the Mexican connection, we're just trying to have they're not going to do Canada. They're not going to send it to Mexico. And with Mexico jumping on board saying, hey, we've got an economy here, we're going to lock down our southern border.
We're going to work with Guatemala. And I mean, we can actually start a reaction where we could actually do something good for a country. Maybe, who knows, until we fuck it all up. But right now, what the drug war was supposed to be was not a drugs for guns scheme, not Fast and Furious, not, Iran-Contra deals. It was supposed to be none of that. It was supposed to actually just say, hey, let's work at home, let's figure out how our domestic problem is, and let's get these cartels to actually stop producing it. This is what a lot of us thought we were fighting. I'm just saying, let's actually do that job. Don't let have me funnel cash into Caymans. Don't let me see shits, and so you can have your private yacht, Congressman. Let me sink it down to the bottom of the ocean, and we'll move on from there. And you may not like it. It may sound cruel. It may sound mean. You don't have to worry about it. There are plenty of men like me who will go do this and be able to sleep like a baby at night.
Let me inject some administrative. I see Mojo left, and I'm no geek, so I have no idea how to close a room, and I'm not going to close it, but I am going to leave myself. There are other mods here, and I really want to thank all of you for participating in this thing, and it was a great conversation, and as I said earlier, we made a couple of mini steps to reach some fundamental agreement across political lines that is almost amazing in today's clubhouse. So thanks a lot. I'm going to bow out and keep on.
Likewise, Anson.
All right, take care.
Take care, Captain.
But Brad, if you were in the Pentagon, the 5-star general, why do you think deploying soldiers and giving them those operations is an effective usage of their time? Because you're going to have a lot of casualties and people that die. Plus, there's a lot of women in the narcotics industry. So they're going to be killing a lot of women who are ride or die type hoes with AK-47s that are going to die. I mean, why stir the pot?
So first off, if one of these cartels, they employ women or have ride or die women that are going to pick up an AK, I'm perfectly okay sending them to go meet whatever sky daddy they go by. I have no compunction. Man, woman, or child, it makes no difference to me. If you're harming an American, I will gladly and without purpose and will do it. And there are plenty of men. Do I enjoy having to see a kid or woman get involved in combat? No. But at the same time, if you're going to pick up the weapon, I now consider you a fair player. It does fuck with the mind a little bit, but at the end of the day, I don't know. Which do you like better? Do you like these cartels smuggling over sex traffickers? Do you like them killing people? Do you like them murdering babies? Do you like them, having the weapon states that they have? Do you like them taking your cash? Do you like them bribing officials? Do you like them being terrorists? Do you? I don't know too many people who do. Oh, who the fuck made me a mod?
Anybody else can come up and
kind of understood that, hey, you're going to do.
Police force in every major city to do what they can really do to cut back on crime and illegal alien invasion and drug distribution. I mean, or are Democrat leaders in major
It's just a bunch of people.
I'm just asking you a question.
Invasive imply they use weapons.
Oh, I could show you lots of examples of illegal Venezuelans who have murdered plenty of Americans since being released in this country since Joseph Biden.
You aren't saying invasion implies a standing army with weapons invading a country. That's different than what you're talking about.
Oh, okay. Thanks for clarifying the word invasion for me. I'm just asking you, Brad. Do you think that the U.S. police force is really doing all they can do?
Police forces need to be restructured, so do some of our courts. If you, again, police targeting users, like, I really don't care if somebody's wanting to snort heroin or smoke heroin. I don't know if they smoke heroin, but if I know. I don't really care. That just sounds like a whole lot of shit that I never wanted to know about. But if they're smoking more brain blood barrier easier. So if they're smoking heroin, that's not my problem. Like, you have a choice. You're accountable for your own life. I don't need to send police in. I don't need to direct them. Now, do I need to direct the supplier that's holding on? I don't know.
We're reaching out in regards to the meeting that you booked with us
distributing amongst
a couple of weeks
yeah, I think that needs to get off the street. I think that needs to be targeted, and we can target those. But I think, honestly, screwing up the users, I don't know, like, I think police are mismatched because too many politicians.
Again, wasn't it wonderful that the 5 officers tackled one of their own shooter on base?
People got angry. I said, why does he have a beard? They said it's called shaving chick.
And there's not going to be a hang-up. This is the setback. And I think we can resolve a lot of these things. And I think a lot of these traffickers would run scared. I think the cartels would go back and try to get citizenship in China and be like, please take us in. Because Russia don't fuck around with them. They have drugs. They shoot the traffickers all the time. They don't care. They send them to the gulags. Have fun with that one. That's a whole cold person.
Well, I think from like a domestic manpower, just having the people physically able to do what's required, I don't even know if the manpower is there. And then plus, in many of these organizations, they spend a lot of time investigating their own. There's a lot of people that work in these agencies, whether it's Department of Homeland Security or ICE, etc. That maybe some of them are informants, to the dark side or the other side. So there's a lot of intelligence, and money in all of this. And thus, you have vice and criminal, people who are involved in conspiracies to distribute and profit and get away with doing this type of activity, at scale. But I'm just saying that, you have to be pragmatic in terms of what you have and what your budget is. And unfortunately, we have a lot of stuff that is just, we don't need to replace it. We either need to use it or clean it or make sure it's in good condition. But to be so frenetic, I'm just saying that to have any anxiety over the future.
Like what? Like, what's an example you have in your head?
I'm talking about assets in terms of military divisions, weapons, helicopters, jets, artillery, everything. And there's a lot of soldiers, tackling other soldiers or shooting at other soldiers, like at Fort Stewart. So I'm just saying, instead of letting, guys with beards shoot each other on an army base and then have 5 soldiers tackle a guy who doesn't even have a gun, or they don't even have guns. That's the one thing I can't understand is why on military bases are there so many disarmed people? Even the police at military entrances sometimes aren't even armed with ammunition. They just got, blanks in that gun, or there's no bullets in that rifle. So I'm just saying that if the United States wants to work its way out of the debt and the security crisis, I think You have to look at it from what is actually practical, pragmatic. What can you actually adjust? What levers can be pulled? I mean, that in that way, Trump is like the super consciousness of this country. He has that ability to spend and pull and push. He's got a desk with buttons, and he's got an infinite number of buttons. But it just becomes a question of priorities. I think that Trump and Kennedy and his entire administration really understand that principle. I just think still at $2 trillion with a deficit, I mean, it's just going to get bigger. It's never going to stop. So I think just really determining what the best ROI is, the best bang for our buck is the way to go. And I think that they're doing it. Thank God Elon Musk installed Doge at every agency. And now even Doge Florida is a success. So forensic accounting, pragmatism, and common sense are winning the day.
Those ended up costing more money to run than it actually saves.
Oh, don't be such a negative Nancy, you Republican Marshall.
No, that's not being a negative, Nancy. If you come in as a department that wants to cut federal spending,
Negative Nancy.
Then you should cut more federal spending than your budget is. Otherwise, you can't justify your existence.
You're just being a negative Nancy instead of a positive optimist.
No. If I'm getting somebody who tells me they're going to save me money, yet they cost me more money than they saved me, then they didn't save me any fucking money.
They've saved $1 trillion in woke DEI education contracts, Marshall.
Which is exactly what Doge did. Doge said.
No, Doge saved America $1 trillion in woke DEI climate change gender studies.
Only saves some money, not enough to justify its existence.
Wrong, Marshall. They saved almost $1 trillion already. Go to the Doge calculator.
Be able to justify its existence, and the Department of Government Efficiency can't reasonably justify its existence because it costs more to run than it saves.
These agencies don't. The only agency that raises revenue is called the IRS, Marshall. Every other agency does nothing but spend money on behalf of the American population.
I'm not saying the other agencies don't spend. I'm saying this agency, which was brought under the Trump administration, which people tend to reference, is not an agency that saved more money than it spent. It's an agency that failed in its mission. Don't be wrong.
Okay, I'm gonna find out how much money the federal government has spent on Doge administrative expenses and compare that to how much they stripped in fraudulent contracts. Let me do the quick calculation. I need to see some numbers here, Marshall.
Trying to save money. What I don't applaud is that it costs more money to run that department of employees than it saved for the United States government and taxpayers. It did not save.
Okay, I'm putting that into Grok. We're gonna see what Grok says. We'll let Grok be impartial, as Grok is very impartial. I'm sure Grok will give us the correct answer.
As Elon Musk's AI is impartial. Okay. We'll be serious. Elon Musk's AI is not impartial, but if it's an AI that spits out an answer, why not? Let's take it. Hey, Ewan.
Yeah, Marshall, okay, I kind of want to challenge you on that. Now,
If I am wrong, please correct me.
Okay, so it's actually more of a philosophical point that I want to get into, and it has to do with Doge. But, I'm going to kick that at 2 other rooms for asking this question. I think it's insane that they get so offended by it, but I actually see what is going on in the U.S. and what is going on in the U.K., what's going on in Canada, and it's kind of like the end of liberalism. It's like the end of that ideology. It doesn't exist anymore. We're moving into a new era of belief systems. I don't know how to explain it. We don't know yet. We have not figured out what the fuck is going on. But what I see going on in the UK, because I live here, is literally, it's day 13 in a row where an underage child has been sexually assaulted by a migrant. So we have a massive migration issue, right? Now in the US, you assaulted. dealt with all of that. You also had Doge. You have tried to do government efficiency. In Canada, I mean, you just have like an absolute shit show of a situation. So my question to you is that what I'm seeing is this is the actual end of liberalism, and we're entering into a new era. Do you agree with me, or do you completely disagree?
Oh, I'll agree that we seem to be on the cusp of something a little different. The end of liberalism, not so sure. The end of people believing that institutions are going to solve all their problems and that they don't have to pay attention to life, I think that's probably the thing that's the end of. But like not having to pay attention to what's going on in your life. I think now more than ever you actually do have to pay attention.
Are you projecting?
In the UK, it's like people are paid attention now. It's like everybody now is like talking about what's going on in the UK with like the fucking migrant crisis. Like it's like literally it surrounds me day by day. I don't even want to talk about it, and I have people here talking about it. So it's like that is an issue. But then the UK, the US.
Wait, Ewan, before you continue, before you hold on one sec. Let me just answer Marshall's claim. Okay, this is from Grok. John Kitover asked, the Treasury has. This is what. The Treasury has apportioned $39 million to fund Doge as of February 2025. That's $39 million in funding. That's the Treasury's payment that they have spent on Doge operations. Doge claims that they have saved $199 billion in cuts as of July 2025. But analysis from CBS and others show actual savings of less than 3% claimed, with overall federal spending rising. All right, well, you're repeating the CBS narrative, Marshall.
I mean, are you? You have a different narrative.
There's a Doge calculator. You can look at the Doge X account and see all the contracts, the screenshots from the acquisition system, SAP, that they use.
Yeah, you're missing the point. If you want to prove me wrong or say that my assumption, because that's what it was, is incorrect, like, why don't you present counter numbers?
I did. I just presented two counter numbers.
Then say, I don't know.
They claim they saved $200 billion, and it cost them $40 billion to do it. I don't understand. I just gave you counter numbers.
So they claimed they saved $200 billion.
Well, they show receipts. The response doesn't show receipts.
What you said was they claim. Okay, so if they're claiming, what's the evidence that they actually saved that much money?
The receipts on the Doge X account, and they have a calculator. The other side, CBS. The other side says CBS has no source when they say less than 3%.
Marshall, I'm not gonna lie. Like, we even saw a difference in like activism in the UK out here when Doge like cut all the funding. It's very bizarre shit. I think that it's gonna take probably a decade for us to like fully understand.
Okay, this is the end of the show. Okay, everybody go to johnforcongress.com. Thanks for joining. If you want to join the campaign, text 312-498-0517. We want to jump in one more clown house.
Making it a line of design it's in. You just might not be calling it that.
Well, I mean, that's exactly what I'm opposing. I'm simply saying, like, there should be a state, like, there should be a state of Israel. I'm just simply rejecting the Jew part. Like, in principle, I oppose the fact that there's like a Jewish state, or there's a white state, or an Italian state. Like, I don't.
Lying. Try to hold him if he shit in the street. Exactly. Please confirm or deny that. Wait, I didn't catch that. We need to know. Lion said. In the chat, I said, don't lie on my friend. Lion said that if he was a street shooter.
Chillism, wow. Okay, hope you've enjoyed this podcast. Go to johnforcongress.com.